So, welcome to the New Jersey Globe debate between the candidates for Congress in New Jersey's 3rd District. It's Democratic incumbent Andy Kim and the Republican challenger Bob Healy. I'm David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. And thank you both for joining in on this crucial decision that the voters have to make, a discussion on issues that enables the electorate to compare your views and decide who might best represent them in the U.S. House of Representatives. I've reviewed the rules of this debate with the two candidates in advance. Each will have equal time to present opening statements, to respond to each other's positions, and to ask one question of their opponent, and to make closing statements. Each question in this debate has been prepared by me. I have not shared them with anybody. I will respectfully ask that both candidates stick to their allotted time. I'll raise my hand with about 15 seconds remaining. It'll be a signal to wrap up your answer. If a candidate goes too long, I'll just hold up my hand. If that doesn't work, I'll interrupt. This is my 3rd congressional debate of the cycle, so I very humbly appeal to both of you. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so please let's just try to keep 60 seconds to 60 seconds. And as I always say, my job is to be the moderator. I'm not here to offer my opinion. I'm not here to take sides. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to moderate, and I will look to each of you to make sure that what your opponent says is based on fact. If you are attacked during the response, you get an extra 30 seconds to respond. We conducted a coin toss before the start of the debate. Congressman Kim won the coin toss. He's opted to give the first opening statement and the first closing statement. So Congressman, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks, David, for hosting us. Thanks to the New Jersey Globe, and thanks to the voters for tuning in and having this chance to be able to hear from the two of us about what we're trying to get done. The first thing that I'll say is why do I want to do this? I do this because this district is my home. It's where my parents got the good paying jobs where they could raise me and my sister, where I did my entire kindergarten through 12 in the public school systems here. It's a humbling experience, to represent in Congress the community where I went to kindergarten, where my youngest son now goes to kindergarten. I do this for my kids, for my family, for our community. I tried to represent as best as I could. I'm someone that was a public servant my whole career. I served under both Republicans and Democrats as a national security official. And now I'm stepping up to be able to serve this community. I've tried to do it in that same way, grounded in public service, grounded in doing what's right for this country. I've done now 56 town halls, and every single town hall I do, I say, whether you voted for me or not, you're my boss. And my job is to serve you. That's what I've done to be able to make sure that we're trying to lower costs, especially healthcare costs and prescription drug costs for seniors, about keeping our country safe and our community safe, making sure that we're addressing crime in the same way we're addressing the challenges that we face globally, as well as the work that I do on the Small Business Committee, looking out for our economy, making sure that we're addressing the issues that so many are struggling with in this difficult moment. Those are the things that I will continue to work on if reelected, to try to be someone who will be a workhorse, not a show horse for this community, and make sure that we ground ourselves always in that public service, not the hyperpartisanship, not the toxicity that we all hate about the politics of the moment, but it's about delivering for this community, being able to get the infrastructure that we need, being able to get the support for our veterans that we need, being able to get our work moving forward in all the ways that we need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Healy, we'll go to you for your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, David and the New Jersey Globe, for organizing and moderating this debate. And thank you to Congressman Kim for participating. Our country's headed in the wrong direction. Record inflation, out of control crime, parents being labeled as extremists for simply asking questions about what their children are taught in school. And then, of course, hyperpartisanship, where politicians, like my opponent, vote 100% of the time with their party, even if it's the complete opposite of what their constituents want. I'm running to offer new direction and an outsider's perspective. I'll fight to cut inflation and balance our budget. I'll stand with our police and give them the tools they need to keep us and themselves safe. And I'll empower parents to speak out, not try to silence them. and I'll never be afraid to stand up to my own party when they need to be told no. I look forward to tonight's debate and look forward to hearing and earning your vote at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Congressman, I'll ask you the first question. On Saturday, former President Obama, who you work for at the White House, said that only Democrats have the ability to solve inflation. Do you agree? And has our nation become so partisan that only members of one political party believe they have the ability to fix the nation's economy?
Well, look, I don't agree with statements like that. I find that to be unproductive and unhelpful because we really need to come together to be able to address this in the same way that we did when we were facing the pandemic in March of 2020. We came together in a bipartisan way to be able to address these issues. My opponent always likes to try to attack and saying that it's only my party that's doing the spending. Over 2/3 of the spending on COVID happened under the Trump administration. And we did it in a unanimous way, trying to work together to solve problems. The challenges that we face when it comes to inflation, it's real. And neither party has a monopoly on all the good ideas that are out there. So I love to be able to work together to be able to address some of these issues, like the price gouging that's out of control. We're seeing record profits. I think ExxonMobil got $20 billion in profits this quarter. Whereas that was 3 times what they got in this quarter of last year. We're seeing huge problems there. That's hopefully something that we can work on together to be able to lower costs for families, to be able to address these issues. But this hyperpartisanship, this name blaming, and whichever side it's coming from, it's wrong.
Thank you.
Well, David, I also disagree with that statement. I don't believe that one side has a monopoly on solving these issues. But unfortunately, we have an administration for over the last 2 years has run counter to the advice that both economists on both sides gave them about continued spending, continuously overheating this economy. I think there are topics that can help the people of New Jersey with what's going on with inflation and what's going on with their cost of living. I look at the SALT deduction. That's an issue that is going to have to be bipartisan if we're going to get that done. That's an issue that there are members of the other side of the aisle here in New Jersey who want to get that done. And I look forward to working with them down in Washington.
Mr. Healy, let me ask you a follow-up. You have labeled the Inflation Reduction Act as irresponsible, but and you've made inflation a top issue in your campaign. If you win, what is your specific plan to reduce the prices of fuel and food and other goods that are affecting the lives of the people you want to represent?
Well, David, I think one of the first things that we can do is get back to being energy independent in this country, and that means starting from the top down. We stop scapegoating our domestic energy producers here. This question makes me think about Carollo's down the street, the pizza place that's down the street from both the congressman and I. Every single truck, every single vehicle that delivers food and supplies to them is charging that owner a gas surcharge, just like they're charging, a shopping center a gas surcharge. So right there is one thing that we can work on. I think a second thing to do is we have to look at wasteful spending. Under this current administration, we paid $2 billion to municipalities that don't exist. We've spent $3,500 on people who are in jail, sending them checks. That's the kind of wasteful spending that we don't need going forward.
And Congressman, let me get you on the same question.
Well, look, on the first thing, my opponent talked about the SALT cap. I mean, first of all, a history lesson here. It was the Trump administration that put that in place. It was legislation that my opponent supported. And that is something that I just find continue to be mind-boggling that he tries to attack me for this. This is something that we have to be able to work on, but it's his party that's in the way. And it's something that I find extremely frustrating for the people of New Jersey. On top of that, yes, we got to make sure that we're addressing these issues of rising costs. But again, I raise these issues about price gouging from these oil companies. It's, again, the Republicans that voted against the efforts we were trying to do to be able to address this price gouging, where we're seeing this out of control profits, profiteering off of the American people who are paying more at the gas pump. So making sure that we can reduce these costs, whether that's our healthcare costs, our prescription drug costs, but also tackling these issues of fixing our supply chain and this price gouging. Those are steps that we can and should be able to work on in a bipartisan way.
Thank you. And Congressman, another follow-up on the issue of inflation. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said that the Inflation Reduction Act's effect on inflation was minimal. These were their words, negligible at best. Was this just an election year smoke and mirrors to plan to help Democrats keep a majority in the House, or will this plan work to reduce inflation?
Well, look, what I'll say is that what's key here is lowering that deficit. I think any expert will tell you that's an important step. So this lowered our deficit by over $300 billion. That's a move in the right direction. There are a lot of complicated issues here that we're trying to address with this legislation and many others. The key thing is about lowering out-of-pocket costs. That's what everyone's been talking to me about, which is why these steps that we took in that legislation, like allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices or capping out-of-pocket costs for seniors when it comes to their prescription drugs at $2,000 a year. That was my legislation. I was able to pass that into law. And if these pieces of legislation were already in effect, seniors right here in this district alone would have saved $36 million last year. That's real savings that would help them navigate this difficult time and be able to reduce those costs that are coming out of pocket. So I think it would make a huge difference for families right now.
And Mr. Healy?
Well, I find it interesting that the congressman wants to talk about SALT. Look, I wasn't in Congress when that got voted on. Certainly, when I go to Congress, I'll have votes. I'll vote differently than the congressman. But the congressman had a chance, a real chance to be a bipartisan leader, to do the right thing for the people of this district when the Inflation Reduction Act vote came up. He could have dug his heels in. And worked across the aisle, worked with members of his own party here in New Jersey to really bring this issue to the forefront when they were passing legislation. And instead, he did what he has done for the last 2 years. He's voted 100% of the time with Joe Biden. So I find that interesting. The second thing I would say is, I was just in Marlboro at a senior community this morning, and the people that I talked to there, they're upset about drug costs, and they're upset about healthcare costs being up 25% across the board because of the inflation we have right now.
And Congressman, you talked about your votes. Let me give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
Yeah, again, this attack on SALT, it's just it's one of the weirdest things I've ever come across in politics, hearing it from my opponent. It's like trying to, it's like someone's setting a fire and then criticizing people that are slow to put it out. We're doing our best here, but what we need are people on the other side of the aisle to step up, and they're not doing it. So again, get your party in order. We're working on our side to try to get this done. But yes, we want to make sure we're lowering these healthcare costs. And what my opponent said about these seniors in Marlboro, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Lowering these prescription drug costs, lowering the costs of Medicare, try to get everyone on Medicare, vision, hearing, dental coverage.
Thank you. Abortion is one of the top issues in congressional races across the nation. And while I promise that I'll give each of you time to discuss the position of your opponent and his political party, and I'll start with Mr. Healy. I'd ask each of you to just take 1 minute and outline the specifics of your own position on abortion.
David, I am personally pro-life, and there are exceptions to that. Rape, life of the mother. But here in New Jersey, I believe that we can and should find compromise around the first trimester. I do not support federal legislation on this. I don't support states that would seek to ban it outright. I don't think that that's right. And I've made that position very clear. I've made it clear in the New Jersey Globe. You were kind enough to print our op-ed, my op-ed. And I've made it clear to the congressman who has run ads that are exactly counter to what I just said, has spent millions of dollars in mailers and on TV. I even sent the congressman a certified letter to make sure that he understood it. So, I mean, why he continues to run ads that are counter to everything that I've stated on this issue is, it's just disappointing.
And
I'm happy to jump in on my side here. I mean, look, you know, I've made it crystal clear what it is that I'm working on and what I believe in here, which is that it is absolutely crazy that in 2022 that we're still having this debate, and that this is not only having this debate, but it's going backwards. That we have the overturning of nearly 50-year precedent when it comes to rights and freedom for women. And for this to just be turned over on a dime here, it just created such upheaval. It's a complicated issue. I get that. And there are a lot of different opinions about it. I did a town hall on this in Mount Laurel, and I heard a lot of different perspectives on it. But that's exactly why it was so important for us to have Roe, because it was a place where we had that precedent that we were building a country around and trying to make sure that we can find some avenue going forward. I voted now twice to codify Roe v. Wade in federal law, and that's what I believe is the right way to go. We can't just throw it to the states. This is a huge problem. What we see right now, where states are able to literally ban in the cases of rape and incest and life of the mother, we need to have some foundation here, some semblance that women's rights and freedom are important and not subservient to the rights of these states.
And let me ask Congressman a follow up, because this is an important issue, so we'll talk a little bit about it. But Lindsey Graham has proposed a 15-week ban that includes some exceptions. Some Republicans say the ban ought to begin at 20 weeks. The difference appears to be a belief as to when an unborn child begins to feel pain. I'd like to ask you, and then I'll ask Mr. Healy the same question. What's your personal belief on the science on this? When, in your view, does an unborn child begin to feel pain?
Well, I think a lot of it that we've talked about in the Women's Health Protection Act with Roe v. Wade, again, our country has moved forward on this question about viability and about making sure that we have places where states can have conversations about that at a certain threshold they're going forward. But what we need to have is that kind of foundation for this. And when you talk about Lindsey Graham's 15-week abortion ban proposal for a national ban, which would be crazy and would overturn what we have here in New Jersey, you know, my opponent literally just said it in his remarks about this, that he actually wants to go even more extreme than that. That he wants to go even more extreme than Lindsey Graham. He wants to go for a first trimester, a 13-week ban here in New Jersey. That's what he's pushing for. You know, and I just find it so mind-boggling as well. You know, that is even more restrictive than Utah, even more restricted than Montana. And so my opponent is the fact that he's even more extreme on this than Lindsey Graham is very scary to me.
And we'll go to Mr. Healy on this.
Congressman Kim talking about extremism on this issue is it's concerning, because if Congressman, your op-ed that you wrote in the New Jersey Globe talked a lot, but it didn't state your position. It didn't state your votes. So I will tell everybody at home what you voted for, since you don't want to talk about it. You voted to have abortion up to the moment of birth. You voted to have non-doctors perform abortions, which is just not safe. And you voted to have to allow a young girl as young as 15 years old seek an abortion without any parental notification. Forget about consent. When in the state of New Jersey, a 15-year-old girl needs parental permission to get her ears pierced, and you voted for that in federal legislation. That's an extreme position, Congressman. It's a position that's out of step with this district. And it's just one more example of how you talk very nice when you come to this district. You sound like a nice guy. But when you go down to DC, you vote with your progressive caucus. You vote with your party 100% of the time.
And Congressman, let me give you a chance to respond to that. 30 seconds, though.
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, I really asked my opponent to actually read the legislation. The legislation in there is about codifying Roe. Roe wasn't about gave that idea and that opportunity about that viability and about talking about that and allowing opportunities for states to engage. It's not about trying to create a national standard that along the lines of what he was saying. And I just find it completely ridiculous that he's just twisting and turning this legislation and trying to make it sound scary. The main reason why he's doing it is to cover up his extreme positions on this.
And Mr. Healy, I have a follow-up on this issue. This summer, Sierra Leone took steps to decriminalize abortion. They're taking steps to support a law that calls for risk-free motherhood. The humanitarian foundation that you run has worked to increase access to healthcare for people of Sierra Leone. If the proposal backed by President Bio becomes law, will your foundation fund legal abortions in Sierra Leone?
David, my foundation will continue to do what it has done, which is to attempt to help pregnant mothers and postpartum mothers and young children continue to have healthy births and continue to have healthy early stage life. I mean, you know, out there in Sierra Leone, there are things that we can't, very minor problems that we can't even imagine that affect mothers and pregnant women and all the time. Children under the age of 5 have a much less of a life expectancy than they do here, and we'll continue to fight to help increase the quality of life for them for as long as I've got breath, David. I mean, that charity changed my life. My time out there has changed my life.
Okay, thank you. And Congressman, let me let you respond to that.
Well, look, I just hope that that same kind of care that my opponent wants for women and their health out in Sierra Leone is what the attention that we give to them here in the United States. There are a lot of women right now that live in states that have literally had the rug pulled out from under them, and they are living in places where they cannot get an abortion at all. And that's the kind of change in this country that's putting a lot of lives at risk right here in this country right now. And that's what I hope we can focus on. Thank you.
Congressman, I want to ask you a foreign policy question. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, he's a Hindu nationalist, and he has supported depriving Muslims of certain rights, including land ownership. In New Jersey, where there's a rapidly increasing South Asian community, especially in the new parts of the 3rd district you're seeking to represent, are you concerned about those who seek to create a divide between Hindus and Muslims?
Oh, I'm always concerned about the challenges of diversity and living in a heterogeneous country. And what I always hope is that we can put forward that effort to recognize that we need to be a community, that we come from different backgrounds. As an AAPI, I'm the first AAPI elected to federal office from New Jersey. I've tried my best to be able to engage with a lot of different communities here. We understand that we're not monolithic as an AAPI group or as Americans, but I do get very frustrated at times by some of the divisions that are being erected, where I understand that there are deep beliefs and that what happens in other countries has spillover effect. But here we should always make sure that we recognize that we are part of that same community and that we cannot allow that hate and that division, especially fomented from other parts of the world, to affect us. We can have disagreements, but we should never get to the place where it's literally tearing us apart. This kind of challenge is enormous, and one that I've really been putting a lot of effort in, whether that's about anti-Semitism or about the challenges that you raised, or about the hate and discrimination facing the Asian American community that we've faced over the last couple of years. I hope we can come together.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
David, this question is particularly pertinent to me and also to the district. I had the good fortune to spend several months in India, visit their holy places, and it's beautiful country, wonderful people, and also an experience that impressed a lot of things upon me and changed my life. For the district, we have the largest Hindu temple, I believe, in the United States, in Robbinsville. And I've had the good fortune to visit there on Krishna Janmashtami, on Diwali. And then we have a vibrant Hindu community up in places like Marlborough and Homedale, as well as other parts of the district. And the people that I've talked to there, open, welcoming, want their places of worship to be open to all peoples. And so I think we need to take out a page out of that book. This country should be open to anyone of any faith. I think the beautiful thing about this country is that whether you're an Indian American or a Middle Eastern American or an Italian American, we're all Americans. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Healy, I'll move on to another question. This is a question I've asked congressional candidates in North Jersey and in Central Jersey. It remains essentially unchanged for the 3rd district. Crime is up. Car thefts have increased. Home invasions have increased. And the people you wish to represent, they just don't feel as safe in their homes as they used to. How would you reduce crime in your district and in your state?
Well, David, this is a huge problem. I think we have to change the narrative first, and that starts from the federal part all the way down. Right now, we have an administration that has literally scapegoated police. I was in Monmouth this morning. You've got usually 1,300 brave men and women who want to apply to the police academy up at Monmouth and every year. This year, less than 400. So this is a problem that's going to wreak havoc on our country for years to come if we don't deal with it. Police are retiring in record numbers. Less people want to do this job. What concerns me is that, my opponent is part of a far left progressive caucus that wants to defund the police. My opponent was part of a group called Rise Stronger that promoted books from cop killers that had a plank about defunding the police before he got into Congress.
Okay. Congressman, let me let you respond to that.
Yeah, I would like to, because again, we need to set the record straight. I wish my opponent would just start by telling the truth. And by telling the truth, it's that I'm not someone that supported defunding the police. I've been a national security official my whole career, working on counterterrorism, trying to keep this country safe and trying to keep our community safe. That's why I was able to increase the amount of funding that's going to law enforcement around this country. I recently worked with Cinnaminson to be able to get them 3 new police officers using federal funding. I worked with Stafford Township to be able to get them additional funding to be able to support their police. Both of those towns have Republican mayors, Republican councils. I'll work with anybody to be able to get things done and to be able to keep our community safe. And that's why I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police 2 election cycles in a row. So let's just cut this out. We both want to keep our community safe. We're both fathers. Why would we want to do things that would make our kids less safe? So let's cut out the politics and just try to find solutions to do just that.
And Congressman, let me stick with you on a new issue. This is your 3rd campaign for Congress. This is your 3rd campaign against an opponent with a willingness to self-fund his race. There's no doubt that money matters when it comes to running for office. You don't accept corporate PAC contributions, but the reality is that there is a system in place that allows for many ways around this. There's plenty of opportunities for a particular donor to move their money in support or opposition of any candidate they wish. What's the solution to this?
Yeah, well, look, you're absolutely right. It is a broken system. And the solution to it is what I tried to get passed. I got it through the House of Representatives, the For the People Act, which proposes major changes to campaign finance reform, be able to end the dark money, be able to make sure that we're addressing this issue when it comes to special interests and lobbying. It's about making sure we're getting rid of the partisan gerrymandering. So much of the people I talk to, they feel such little trust. We live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in American history. What I tried to do by not taking the corporate PAC money, that's my way of trying to show them that I'm different, that we can move in a different direction. And I've been trying to push legislation that would do just that, whether that's the legislation I'm trying to push right now that would ban members of Congress from owning individual stocks. These are real steps to take that will hopefully fix this system and try to restore some of that trust that was badly lost.
Mr. Healy?
Well, if we're talking about PAC money, I mean, the Congressman's campaign has benefited from tens of millions of dollars over the last 4 years, or in outside PAC money. In addition, Congressman, you've taken money from the NJEA. Now that's a group that spends a ton of their money. Lobbying has created a dark money PAC to oust parents who just want to have a say in their children's education. So look, again, it sounds nice, but it's the same DC game that many politicians play.
Thank you. Before we go to a point where you're each going to get to ask each other questions, it's hard, and I'll stick with you, Mr. Healy. It's hard to not notice that both of you are, relatively young, the same age. Your combined age is 79, and we could sit here all night and name American political leaders who are older than your combined ages. Mr. Healy, is there a need for generational change in American politics where presidents and members of Congress and justices are not in that octogenarian range?
I think there is, David. I think there's a need for younger voices in politics. It's good to see that there's 2 millennials running in the 3rd district. I look at the Democratic Party. The top 3 leadership there is in their 80s. I would imagine that that's going to be a real problem for their leadership going forward. And when I go out through all 53 towns in this district, I've been to every single one. I see more and more young people coming out wanting to get involved. And their issues and their concerns are certainly different than people who are in their 50s or their 60s. So I think it's a great thing to see younger and younger people getting into this.
Thank you. Congressman, I'll give you the same question.
Yeah, look, it's important to have a government that looks a lot more like the rest of America. And that's something that we do on we try to do on a lot of different fronts. When I first came into Congress and got sworn in, I was the only Korean American in Congress. I'm currently the youngest Asian American elected to federal office in the nation. And that isn't just about the stats. It's important to have young parents in Congress. During the pandemic, to be able to give that perspective of what young parents are struggling with their kids at home, with their kids out of school, trying to make sure that we're navigating this well. There's a reason why I focused and helped get across the line into law paid parental leave for every federal employee, and why it is I'm trying to have universal childcare and universal kindergarten and pre-K across this entire country, have the childcare and the sick leave for families. It's because I'm experiencing a lot of these challenges, and it's important to have that kind of voice. And I'm going to continue to be that kind of voice and stand up to have that kind of role in Congress.
Thank you. And now we enter the portion of the debate where each candidate asks a question of his opponent. Congressman Kim, you go first. You have 30 seconds to ask the question. Mr. Healy, you have 60 seconds to respond, and you'll get a 30-second rebuttal on that. So, Congressman, it's your turn to ask a question, Mr. Healy.
Sure. Well, look, I'll build this off of a previous question because I wanted to be able to rebut this. But my opponent has now put in nearly $3 million of his own money, and this coming at a time when families are really struggling right now, paying their bills. For him to throw in $3 million, but what really kind of sets us apart from other races that I've been in is that he got his mom to give $2 million to create a super PAC to be able to help get a job. And, this comes from my opponent who says that, people need to be on their own, stand on their own 2 feet. And he's someone who's pushing dangerous legislation, like opposing us lowering prescription drug costs, the luxury tax that he's always keeps talking about. I guess I just want to ask my opponent, why is it that you decided not to do this job on your own merit, but then to go ask your mom to be able to help you get this job and be able to fund you and bankroll your campaign?
I decided to do this job, Congressman, because we sat on my back porch and you told me a bunch of really great things. You want to talk about that luxury tax, Congressman? You and I had a discussion about that tax on my back porch, talked about the jobs and businesses it destroyed throughout this country, throughout the state of New Jersey, throughout your own district. Now, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and looking for a different result. That tax cost more money to be collected than it ever made for the federal government. And yet somehow you seem to think that, look, you're a smart person, Congressman, you're a Rhodes Scholar, and you seem to think that being supportive of taxing manufacturing at a time when we're in the middle of a recession is a good idea.
Congressman, let me give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
Well, I mean, he didn't even bother to answer the question. I just find that to be so evasive. And the question that he's now turned into is something totally different that just shows that he knows he's out of touch with the American people, that his family's put in $5 million to buy this seat in Congress at a time when families are struggling. And I just find that to be ridiculous.
Mr. Healy, let me give you a chance to ask a question to Congressman Kim.
Sure. Congressman, crime's on the rise across the district. In our hometown of Moorestown, the 7-Eleven has been robbed twice in the last 10 days. And school buses have been burglarized for their parts. And residents across the district, they're scared. You've promoted books by cop killers when you ran a far-left resistance group. You supported progressive law enforcement policies, including defunding the police. You share donors with the most progressive DA in the country, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. So I just want to ask you, do you think Larry Krasner has done a good job, or would you support the current efforts in Pennsylvania to impeach him?
So I don't know Larry Krasner. I've never met him. I've never been in the same room with him. I don't really understand why you're asking me this question. We live in New Jersey. We live in Burlington County. Our district is Burlington County, Mercer County, and Monmouth County. What I can tell you is that in these counties, especially in Burlington that I've represented, again, I've helped them get more cops. I've got Cinnaminson. We've worked together to get 3 new cops for them. We got millions of dollars coming back into this community from federal dollars that support law enforcement. And you just heard me say I don't ever support defunding the police. There's literally never been a time I ever said that. Yet you continue to do this. I get it. You have talking points in front of you. But sometimes you just have to confront the truth. And the failure for you to confront that truth and failure to recognize that I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of the Police twice. Yet you just try to ignore that and just shape your own reality. Crime is a problem. It is something that's serious. It's not something that should be used as just a political talking point. We should work together, but you can't when you don't share that common truth.
And Mr. Healy, let me give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
Well, Congressman, I've been endorsed by the PBA, which is one of the largest police organizations in the state of New Jersey. And your answer shows how out of touch you are, because that question is directly relevant on our district, because so many people in the last 3 years have moved out of Philadelphia for those problems. So many people in our district go to work in Philadelphia day in and day out. So frankly, Congressman, if you maybe had visited all 53 towns in this district, actually talk to the people, you might realize that that's a very relevant question, because it's a question I've been asked at many, many meet and greets that I've gone to.
Thank you. Let me go to Congressman Kim. Joint Base McGuire Dix Lakehurst is critical to the economy of your district. I mean, you know it. Mr. Healy knows it. The people of your congressional district know it. My question to you is, what makes you believe that you are better able than Mr. Healy to fight for the interests of the Joint Base?
Well, for instance, I've had a whole career in national security. I worked at the Pentagon before. I've lived on a military base before out in Afghanistan. I have served alongside our servicemen and women my entire career. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them and knowledge about how it works. I've also served on the Armed Services Committee for the entire time that I've been in Congress, working to be able to secure these missions for this base. I know that base inside and out in terms of what it is that we're trying to do, not just today and tomorrow, but going forward. In addition to that, it's not just about the missions, it's also about the service members. And having worked alongside them, having them save my life and the lives of others out in Afghanistan to do the work that we did, I owe them a debt of gratitude I can never repay. That's why I work with them on their mental health care and healthcare issues to be able to support their families. It's why I work with the veterans and put so much effort into supporting them, including a new VA health clinic, which is why I was named the Legislator of the Year by the VFW. So I've shown what I do over the course of my entire career, not just talking points, but I've lived it. And I'm going to continue to serve that base, continue to serve this community.
Thank you.
Well, David, look, Joint Base is one of the biggest economic drivers in this district in southern New Jersey. Billions and billions of dollars back into the state where we don't get so much federal money for our tax dollars that go down to Washington. And certainly continuing to keep missions coming into that base. Anybody who thinks that bracking is not a possibility need look no farther than a little bit farther north than Fort Monmouth and what happened there and how disastrous that was. I can tell you some things that I wouldn't do. I would not join a caucus that has talked about a 10% cut across the board for the defense budget. My opponent did that when he went down to Washington. He's still a member of the Progressive Caucus. I would not vote to cut the pay of service members making under $45,000 a year in committee. My opponent has done that.
Thank you, Congressman Levy. This is such a hugely important issue to your district. I want to give you a chance to respond, and we'll keep this going.
Thank you, because it honestly it's offensive at this point, because the last place that partisan politics belongs is when it comes to our military. I would love to be able to say that both of us support our military. How could that be wrong? But for him to just say what he just did, it's insulting. I voted 11 times in a bipartisan way to be able to increase our pay for our troops. What he just said is a blatant lie, as big of a lie as anything I've ever heard in my time in politics. And for it to happen on an issue about our troops, using our troops as a partisan tool, a cudgel, it's just shameful, honestly. And I really can't believe what I'm hearing right now. I'm sure we both care about our security, care about our troops. Why would you say such a thing?
Mr. Healy, let me come back to you for 30 seconds.
Well, as John Adams once said, facts are stubborn things, and those are facts, Congressman. I'm sure that I would hope that we both support our troops and our military. But those facts are facts. Those are things that's a caucus that you're a member of. Those are votes that you took when two other members of New Jersey on that committee voted in the opposite manner. Facts are stubborn things.
And Mr. Healy, you've declared your support for the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe. You've said that it's a matter for states to decide with some restrictions. You're also a supporter of the Second Amendment. So my question is, and I guess this is one of political theory, why is it okay for the Constitution and the federal government to decide gun rights but not abortion rights?
Well, David, I wasn't a gun owner. My parents weren't gun people, and then I was lucky enough to learn how to become a gun owner by somebody who was in law enforcement, who used to be former military, how to become a responsible gun owner. We've got some of the toughest gun laws here in the state of New Jersey. And, those laws also influence gun ownership here, state laws. So, I see that we've got state laws influencing gun ownership, just like we have state laws influencing a lot of other things that federal legislation touches on as well.
And Congressman?
Well, look, on this issue of gun violence, it's so shocking just what continues to happen in our country. And just what we saw in St. Louis the other day, someone who his family knew he had a problem. They used red flag laws to try to take away some of the firearms that he had, but yet he still somehow got his hands on an AR-15, had 600 rounds of ammunition and high capacity magazines. We are broken right now as a country when it comes to this issue. And it's not just mental health issues like my opponent continues to turn to. Yes, we worked in a bipartisan way to get legislation through to address some of those mental health issues, to try to take some steps forward, but we continue to fall short of meeting this moment. And again, my opponent just continues to push on policies here that I think are very dangerous, unwilling to take on the issue that we have, which is just this carnage that is happening constantly, and the fear that our kids have when going to school and the challenges that we face. I hope we can do better.
And let me ask you, let me stay with you on this. You have both mentioned mental health issues as a priority. You know, again, political theory, you might imagine this shouldn't be partisan. Treating mental health shouldn't be a Democratic response or a Republican response, but it is. You've been a member of Congress for 4 years. Tell me what you've done to improve the services, mental health services throughout the country.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is I mentioned this bipartisan legislation that's increasing the support that we're putting forward on mental health. Is it enough? Absolutely not. We are dropping the ball when it comes to this, and the Trump administration and the Biden administration didn't do enough on this. We're trying to push and be able to make sure that we're tackling this at a deeper level, especially when it comes to our kids right now. The number one thing I hear from educators right now is the crisis of mental health when it comes to our young students right now, the challenges that they're facing. The other aspect of this is about substance use disorder. We're failing when it comes to the opioid crisis. 100,000 people died last year due to this. This is something that we can and should do better. I helped pass the MAT Act that tries to provide additional resources to be able to on medically assisted treatment, but we're still falling way short. This is a massive crisis, amongst the biggest that we face right now, and we can and should be able to take on in a bipartisan way, take on fentanyl, take on the poisoning of people and the exploitation of the mental health challenges that we're facing right now. So those are some of the biggest things that I've done and I'm trying to do.
Thank you. Mr. Healy, let me ask you about mental health issues also.
Well, look, it shouldn't never be a bipartisan, or it should never be a polarized issue on either party. It should be bipartisan. I've worked with young people at risk on our farm in Burlington County in Lumberton, where I grew up. Worked with children of military veterans. Worked with first-time offenders through the sheriff's department in Burlington County, and worked with children of military veterans. And look, now being a father of a 16-month-old girl, I got to tell you, I question every day whether what I'm doing is affecting her mental health and how she's going to turn out just by the decisions I make. So it's more relevant to me than ever that we have to address this in youth programs. We have to, if you can get somebody when they're younger and start to work with them. I've seen it, David. I've seen it in my own community. Just how you can turn somebody on and get them to a much more productive life and help them to overcome some of these issues early on.
Thank you. Mr. Healy, in parts of New Jersey, it's more expensive to buy an apple than it is to purchase a Twinkie. So people that are dealing with inflation and people who are watching their pennies, so they buy the Twinkie. They don't buy the apple. President Biden has committed to ending hunger in America by 2030. He wants to make food more affordable. He wants to integrate nutrition and health priorities into the national agenda. Do you support President Biden's initiative on hunger?
Look, I think those are lofty goals, and anybody who's going to talk about them, I would be supportive of. I'm a yoga instructor, David. I try to be pretty good about what I put in my body, but for many people, that's really difficult right now. We've got the highest inflation that we've had in 40 years. People that I talk to are making decisions about whether to buy gas or groceries. And to your point, whether to buy an apple or something that's cheaper and maybe less healthy. So access to healthy foods is important, but one of the ways we can get there, one of the ways that we can do that is to start to address some of the spending that we've got, start to address our energy policy, which has been to beg other countries for oil rather than talking about the domestic production we've got here. Starting to lower this inflation will be helpful to that. And I would hope that the president would look at that as a step in his program.
Congressman Kim, let me ask you about the issue of healthy foods and availability to the public.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest issues that I've worked on. One of the first meetings that I had when I became a member was learning about how there are over around 60,000 people in the third congressional district that are considered food insecure, which is just a bureaucratic way of saying they're hungry. About 16, 17,000 of them kids. And that just really broke my heart to just understand just how dire things. And that was before the pandemic, before the rising costs. And sure, it's getting worse. I was there at the White House Hunger Summit, again, bipartisan summit, when the president made that declaration. I wholeheartedly support this. I've been working with Speaker Coughlin and others here in New Jersey to try to address this issue. And I'm glad that we have champions to deal with hunger. I also talked with a lot of our farmers, a lot of our agriculture. We got a ton of agriculture in the Jersey 3rd Congressional District. This can be a win-win where we can provide a great amount, abundance of healthy foods for kids. I've worked a lot to be able to get the YMCAs to be able to do more when it comes to school meals, meals for the kids and other issues, while we're also being able to support our agriculture. Right now, farms are struggling from major droughts, major problems. We can renew what it means to be the Garden State while we're tackling this issue of hunger. So it certainly needs to be a top priority for all of us.
Thank you. And Congressman, let me stick with you for the next question. Many people worry about the future of local journalism, and at least in my opinion, nowhere in New Jersey has the decline been starker or with greater rapidity than in your district, where the Burlington County Times has gone from being a significant daily news organization to again, in my opinion, providing just the bare minimum of local news. At the same time, we've seen from both sides of the political spectrum an increase in unverified, inaccurate information. Where do you see the future of local news and local journalism headed?
Well, it's not heading in a good place, and the trajectory has been there going for decades now, but it's certainly accelerating. You're right, we face a huge problem when it comes to being able to get that reliable information about what's happening locally. This was something that my office was trying to fill some of that gap during the pandemic in terms of just getting people information about where to go for testing sites or be able to get support here or there. But we lacked a lot of tools to be able to amplify that from the media, and that's going to be a problem. And as you said, we're getting more and more disinformation, this weaponization of information that's out there. And it also bleeds into the problems that we have with just the nationalization of everything. Just everything's now being seen at just at that national level. And the biggest breakdown here is that we're losing touch with what it means to be a community, losing that kind of local feel, which is just heartbreaking. So I certainly want to make sure that we're doing more to try to support and keep up and lift up that local journalism that plays a huge pillar role in our democracy.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
Well, certainly, I remember a time when I was a kid where the Burlington County Times, the Courier Post, other papers really did carry a lot of local news, and it's, to your point, David, it's gotten less and less and less over the 39 years that I've been alive. I think about, there are still a couple of papers locally that are still doing some good things. I think about the Pine Barrens Press, for instance, who prints a lot of very local stuff to that area, and I think is sorely missing in other parts of this district and other parts of New Jersey. And that's an issue because when you look at the national stage, things have gotten very polarized, and this ability to talk about the things that bind us together just on a local level from those papers, it's now missing. And people are going more and more to national outlets where, look, let's be honest here, the temperature is rising and it needs to be taken down. It needs to be taken down if we're ever at a hope in this country to see each other as just Americans first again.
So let me ask you a follow-up question off of that, and that is what we see, what Americans see in Congress right now. And there's probably very little doubt that both of your parties have some people that are maybe much further to the left than one, or much further to the right than the other. Mr. Healy, if you get to Washington, based upon some of the answers you've given throughout this campaign, you're not going to be part of a far right group. How are you going to function in that environment in order to represent the people of the 3rd District?
Look, David, I would look at myself more as a guy who would join something like the Problem Solvers Caucus than any kind of far right caucus. That's sort of the way I've been raised. As far, it's just who I am. I'm not going down there to work for my party. I'm going down there to work for the people of this district. I've already taken positions that are counter to my own party. Whether it comes to the presidential election, I think Joe Biden won. Whether it comes down to, the vote on gay marriage, which members of my own party in Congress were against. And I didn't think that was right. I've stated so on social media. So I'm not there to make my party happy. I'm there to work for the people in the 3rd District. That's it.
And Congressman, let me go to you on that same question, which is extreme factions on both sides, on the left and on the right.
Yeah. Well, look, as I said in my opening, I'm somebody that worked as a career public servant before under both Republicans and Democrats. The only time I worked on the Hill before being a member was for a Republican senator. So I try to live and breathe that bipartisanship. I know my opponent continues to just try to rattle off some of these lies, saying that I'm voting all the time with my party. It's just not true. He tried to cite it from the New York Times. We looked, there's nothing there. We called the New York Times. There's nothing that they've done that says that I'm voting this or that way. What we do know from the facts is that 93% of the votes that have done this Congress have been bipartisan, of the substantive votes. And that means that it's been with a Republican, that I've been named one of the most bipartisan members of Congress from the Lucas Center. And so these types of things are going to continue to get that bipartisan infrastructure law into law, to be able to work on the PACT Act for our veterans, to be able to do the CHIPS and Science Act in a bipartisan way, now passed into law. We've been able to do a lot, and I've been able to get a lot of things through for this district by working in that bipartisan way.
And we're almost out of time. I want to get one more question in on policy, because it's an important question. One of the complaints that I hear over and over and over is that businesses can't get people to work, that there's a shortage of teachers, of nurses, of doctors. There's millions of more job openings than workers that are available to fill them. We'll try and keep this short for both of you, but what do you do, Congressman, about solving worker shortages?
Yeah, well, look, as I said, I'm the only member of Congress from New Jersey on the Small Business Committee, so I've been laser focused on this issue when it comes to workforce. That's why we passed the CHIPS and Science Act in a bipartisan way. It's reorienting our supply chain, making it more resilient, bringing more jobs back here to America, including advanced manufacturing jobs, the bipartisan infrastructure law, investment in our workforce. We don't currently have the workforce that we need to build everything that we need to. We need to invest in trade schools, vocational schools, apprenticeships. And that's what we've been working on to be able to do, to be able to address this. Also, be able to move past the toxicity of immigration, to recognize that's the number one thing that I hear business community talking about, is just, we got to open up that pipeline again, be able to get workers coming, to be able to supplement and support while we're continuing to train our workforce here in the United States for the 21st century jobs. So that is something that I've been working on. It's been my top priority on the Small Business Committee. We've done a lot to invest in our communities here at RCBC, at Rowan, and elsewhere, to be able to make sure we have that pipeline.
Mr. Healy, let me ask you the same question on worker shortages.
I think about what the things that we've tried to do with the Viking Yacht Company, David. 65% of our workforce are immigrants, Hispanic. And I've watched, as they have just blossomed, and over one generation have seen the American dream, where their children are doctors or lawyers or police officers or teachers. And we've helped a lot of them through the, through the immigration process and through the citizenship process. We employ 1,600 people. We manufacture something in a state where it's very difficult to do that. We've supported our trade schools for over 30 years, both in Ocean County and in Burlington County, working on apprenticeship programs to show people that, hey, you know what, maybe four-year college isn't for you. Maybe it's a trade. And look, those are great jobs. And I think the more that we can show that through federal and state initiatives, the better.
Thank you. I mean, we're just about ready now for opening statements. I'm gonna break my own rule just a little bit on this in this final congressional debate that I'm moderating this year. I've gotten to know both of you. I don't think I get in any trouble for saying you are both good men. You're both decent, honorable men, wonderful fathers, and that's what campaigns are supposed to be about. Which is you put two good candidates up, and they may have different opinions on issues, and this is an opportunity for voters to compare and contrast who they best want to serve them. I have one last question. This should just be a yes or a no. Both of you are musicians, sometimes professionals, sometimes amateurs, depending on the day. As much as I would have really enjoyed trying to close this debate with a jam session, this is a serious campaign, and you're talking about serious issues facing the country. And I'm gonna, this is as close to a gotcha question as I'm ever gonna go. But when this election is over, regardless of the outcome, will you both come back on with me, and maybe the two of you can sing and play some music and move on and begin a healing process? How's that? How's that for the one question you did not prep for? Okay.
I would, David, I'd be happy to come on with you anytime.
Thank you.
I look forward to it. I look forward to jamming out.
Okay, thank you. And now it's time to move to closing statements. Each candidate has 90 seconds, and we will start with Congressman Kim.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you to the New Jersey Globe, and thanks to my opponent, Bob Healy. Just in that same vein, we're two dads that live just down the same road from each other here. And I hope that all of us across this country can take that step back at this moment and just recognize that what it is that we're trying to do. I'm so worried about the trajectory of this country right now. It feels like at times that we've become this nation addicted to anger, this vitriol that is out there, and we're losing touch with what it means to be an American, what it means to be a citizen. We're sometimes losing touch with it. I often say it feels like we're having a crisis of empathy right now as a country. I want to serve everybody. I know I may not always be able to do that in the way that everyone wants, because we're not going to agree on everything. But I think often through this line that Martin Luther King gave in the I Have a Dream speech, he said, "Let us not try to quench our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred." I understand some people won't agree with everything that I believe in, but I hope you see in me as someone who wants to be that public servant, who has served as a public servant my whole career, that I believe fiercely in this job, in this role, that I think right now is more important than ever, that we have people who are focused on service, not on the partisanship, not on the toxicity that's out there. I don't spend my time knife fighting or flame throwing on Twitter against people on the other side. I want to get things done, to be able to deliver. And that's what I've done. I've been able to get these prescription drug costs lower, to get shovels in the ground on the infrastructure, to be able to support our veterans in the base. And I hope to have the chance to be able to continue to do so. Thank you for listening, and I hope you consider me for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
Well, Albert Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Kind of like sending the same people back to Congress each year and expecting things to change. Now, my opponent, Congressman Kim, has spent 4 years in office voting for policies that have given us record inflation, rising crime. Moreover, he spent literally his entire adult life in Washington, D.C., rendering him increasingly out of touch with people back at home and what they're facing and what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. How else can you explain Congressman Kim joining the Radical Progressive Caucus, a group that wants to cut military spending, would cripple the Joint Base, a group that wants to defund the police, a group that wants socialist economic and fiscal policies that will further drive up the cost of living? Look, folks, we can do better. I'll fight inflation. I'll stand with our police, and I'll always put the people I represent before the party I belong to. And that's a promise. Thank you. And I hope you will consider me for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you. And that brings the New Jersey Globe's 3rd District congressional debate between Congressman Andy Kim, the Democratic candidate, and Bob Healy, the Republican candidate, to a close. This is an important race nationally and in New Jersey. If you don't vote, you don't get to complain about the outcome of the election or the direction the country's headed. If you voted by mail, please take responsibility for your own vote. Track your own ballot. Early voting continues starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. through 8 p.m. through Saturday, and on next Sunday from 10 to 6. And Election Day is, of course, on November 8th. Congressman Kim, Mr. Healy, thank you so much for participating in this forum, and good luck to both of you. And to those watching, thank you and good night.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
David.